Welcome to Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell. This is the place where we dive into the world of talent acquisition, explore the challenges of today's workplace, and discover what it takes to build a thriving and successful organization.
I'm back with Todd Davis, senior consultant and thought leader from Franklin Covey. We've been discussing what first sparked his passion for talent development and building effective teams, the biggest challenges he's faced in transforming organizational cultures, and what inspired him to write Managers Get a Bad Rap and Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. So, Todd, the largest chapter of my book, Firing Your Hiring Habits, is about company culture. In your opinion, why is cultivating a strong, positive culture so critical to the success of an organization?
Great question, and you've written about it. But first of all, getting our heads around what do we mean when we say culture, and there are many definitions out there, and I quite frankly agree with all of them. But in my experience, culture is the way that most of the people act most of the time. I mean, that for me, I can get my head around that. It's the way most people act and behave most of the time. And so, with that in mind, I just think about where do I feel most welcome? Where do I feel most welcome? And I know that can sound a little bit light, but it's one thing, and it's hard to not cross back and forth to diversity, inclusion, and culture, because they're in some respects, and
they're intertwined. You can't. Yeah, they're part of the same.
So what the difference I try and point out to people is, it's one thing to focus on diversity. You're setting invitations to everyone, all walks of life, people from different backgrounds and race and gender, in addition to everything else we've talked about. It's another thing to feel welcome once you get to the party. It's nice to be invited, and that's great. And many organizations are doing really, really well on diversity, but you can have a very diverse team, but no inclusion. I'm thinking about in one of our courses, Inclusive Leadership, there's a short little video, it's literally like less than a minute, of Sandra and her team, and it is so uncomfortable. They're at this table, and as you look at the table, from what we can see, they're very diverse, but they're trying to have a conversation over lunch, and it is so awkward with people stepping on each other, and you can tell there's some feelings going on. And I bring that up because I think it's an aha to some people to think about inclusion can be very different than diversity. In fact, the better you do at diversity, the more you've got to focus on inclusion, because it'll be, you have great inclusion if you invite a bunch of people that are all the same, that have the same background, same experiences, and well, they're going to have a lot to talk about. But we want that richness of the diversity, and so we got to be focused more on inclusion. And going back to some things we've already said, so how do we, because the culture is so important so that everyone feels welcome, we gotta be naturally curious about people. We got to make sure that everybody's feeling heard or has a chance to be heard, or people who don't want to speak up, that you're aware of that nuance too, and that you don't put someone in an awkward situation. And all of those things lead to a great culture, which, back to your original question, well, you have somebody who feels they're doing meaningful work in an environment of trust. Well, what if you have 20 people on your team feeling that way? It's just the math. I mean, you're going to get so much more done and so much more collaboration. And as we call it in the 7 habits, habit 6 is synergy. You have true synergy, this creative collaboration between people.
Yeah, as you were talking about, you can be invited. I was reminded, my wife was teaching a lesson about diversity and inclusion, and she found this quote. I don't know who it's attributed to, so if it's you, whoever out there listening, or whoever, but she says, diversity is being invited to the party, hence your comment triggered this thought for me. Inclusion is being asked to dance.
Yeah.
So just because you're in the room doesn't mean you're really participating.
I love her quote. I hope I can borrow that, because I like that.
It's somewhere out on the internet. I'm sure she got it from somewhere else.
Invited and feeling welcome, but being asked to dance. That's awesome. That's great.
So we understand that it's important. Life at a company is busy. You're trying to keep all these things moving. The same change is happening all the time in the electronics industry, especially. We're constantly trying to reinvent the world, literally every day, and that's your job one. How do companies better prioritize employee well-being and engagement?
Thanks for asking that, John. It's certainly a challenge, and I'm often, when I'm doing these interviews or doing keynotes, I think, boy, is it easy to sit here and talk with someone and say, well, just do this and this and this. Does easy, does hard, right? But I will go back to this balance of production and production capability, or the goose and the golden egg. And it's not easy, but if we're looking for long-term effectiveness, long-term growth, long-term revenue increases, then we will make this a priority. It's not the quick fix. I can go for the egg right now, and I may have the egg for that day, but again, if I'm not investing, we define effectiveness. The essence of effectiveness is doing things today in a way that gives us results, but helps us to get even better results long-term in the future. And so, yes, we've got to get whatever has to be done today done. But if we slow down and do it in a way that is developing people, then we can get even better results over and over again in the future. And so it's being very mindful of that. And that's a huge part of the leader's mindset, saying, yeah, I could tell them how to do this. I could tell the team how to do this. I've done it before in certain situations. Many times I don't know what I'm supposed to do and hope the team can figure it out. But many times the leader could step in and say, here's what we need to do. But in essence, you're killing the goose. Dr. Covey used to say, with people, fast is slow and slow is fast. And so, slow down, teach them how to do it, or let them come up with the ways to do it. And then you're developing people. And then you have that many more, whether they're titled or not titled, leaders in the company getting things done. So it's that long-term result that we've got to discipline ourselves to be focused on. And it's tough. I'm not saying it's easy, but then it helps us more and more put that priority of developing others ahead of the widget that I need produced today.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. Let me do the flip side of it. Are there any kind of hallmarks or indicators that people should watch out for that are indicative of a toxic workplace either existing or potentially festering?
Yes. And I think, just speaking to leaders right now, when you see a behavior that is unwelcoming, when you see a behavior that is non-inclusive, don't be slow to call that out. Be respectful. You're not trying to embarrass anyone, but I'm just, that's fresh on my mind because of something I saw not too long ago. And so be quick to call that out. Have the courage and the consideration to call that out. We have our most recent work section, actually, and I'm not trying to plug all these work sessions, they come to mind because that's what I use, navigating difficult conversations. And so have those difficult conversations immediately, because when you don't, you're sending a subliminal message, or maybe not so subliminal, to the rest of the team that this is acceptable, and it's not. So that's a big watch out. Another one I'm thinking of, and we've already touched on this, but look in the mirror every day yourself as a leader. Are you ready to have, I love your phrase, are you ready to be the shoulders for the team? Or are you still, is your ego or your humility not in a place yet, which that's okay, we're all human beings, but is it not in a place yet where I'm ready to be the shoulder for the team? Because if I'm not, I'm working with someone right now who they're struggling with that. They say they want to be the shoulders, but man, is it important to them to get credit for everything. And they're seeing it when it happens, but unfortunately they're seeing it after it happens each time. So I think those are the two that come to mind. Call out behavior that's not inclusive, that's going against everything you're trying to create as a welcoming, everybody gets to dance culture. Thanks to your wife who found that. And then just continually recognize for yourself, because humility is, some people think of humility as a weakness. I'm soft, meek, submissive. Humility is the greatest strength a leader can have. You think of the most historical, amazing leaders we've had, and think of what's lacking right now in leadership, not to get political, but humility, this humility is so critical in leadership.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were a group of guys get together for a book club that I'm in, and we're fairly progressed in our careers. It's not like we're just starting off. And I was listening to one of them share an example. He said, look, I shared this idea, and they're just constantly saying, oh, this is, you remember that idea that so-and-so brought up, or so-and-so. He's like, get past talking about me. Let's just try to solve the problem. And I loved that, because he was exhibiting, it's like, I don't care where the idea came from, but his follow-up question was like, why do people care about getting attribution? I said, well, we're all kind of stable in our careers, right? We've kind of proven ourselves, that sort of thing. But there are people who, when they share those ideas, if they don't get credit, they're like, oh, somebody's taking credit for my idea because they're not ready to be the shoulders to be stood upon yet. And so I think we need to be careful of both those. We don't want as leaders to sit there and say, well, that doesn't really matter. We're just trying to move the organization forward and don't attribute any ideas. We really need to be sitting there saying, hey, let's recognize those, but let's not dwell on it. Okay. That's great. Good job. And then let's, move it forward. But we're all in different situations, different positions, different times in our careers, different times in the company. Even if you're, a seasoned veteran and you join a new organization, you kind of have to make your name for yourself, right? As people go, yeah, I'm valued here.
That's really wise, John. We are all in different seasons of our careers, and I know there was a time in my career where I needed to, not in an arrogant way, but I needed to make sure that people knew I had contributed to this, and that
I'm valued. I provided value.
yeah. But with the right intent, I need that. I need that acknowledgement with the right intent. Habit number 4. Sorry, back to the habits. But habit, think win-win. And it's all about having this abundant mindset. And you just framed it beautifully. It's not lose-win. It's not, I'll just suffer in silence and be the martyr over here and give everybody else credit. It's win-win. It's not win-lose either. It's win-win. There is plenty out there for everyone and more to spare if we have this abundant mindset of saying, yeah, I want to give recognition, and it's great that I get recognition as well. I'm thinking of first of all, I'm worried that you're going to say, Todd, is there any question I can ask you that you don't have like a 10-minute answer for? But you've got me thinking of an example that has stuck with me for so many years, and I'll embarrass this person because it's a great example, but our current CEO, Paul, when he was a general manager in our company, we'd have these big leadership meetings, and I would notice this subtle but really important attribute about him. And he's just such a wonderful leader. But people in the room would make comments when we were brainstorming the situation. And Paul, for whatever reason, when he would make some of the same comments, he would repeat what someone had said. And often it was a woman. And I know there's have a whole discussion on why men are heard more than women in certain cultures, in certain meetings. But that's not the point here. But I'm thinking of this specific time when a woman had said something, and then Paul later on in the conversation brought it up. And the leader, the current CEO, said, oh, that is a great idea. Let's talk more about that. And Paul would always say, oh, well, you know what? So-and-so said that a few minutes ago. I was just bringing it back to the forefront. So let's have her talk about it a little bit more. So quick to do that from a very sincere place. That's leadership. That's culture.
Making sure people are heard.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about talent development now, if we can. We'll shift away. It's maybe part of culture, but because culture definitely influences it. What are some of the biggest gaffes or mistakes that companies might make when it comes to talent management?
Yeah, that's a really great question as well. All of your questions are so great. You should do this for a living, John.
I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I
do it for fun.
One of them, I don't know if they're mistakes, but one area of opportunity I've seen is, again, going back to really having this empathy, understanding, being naturally curious about people, and placing people in opportunities where they will really shine. So taking the time to understand while my role may be whatever, my natural gifts, yeah, I can do that role, but here's where my natural gifts are. I use the Clifton Gallup Strengths Finder a lot when I'm coaching and helping people who are looking to change or be promoted or whatever, just so that we can understand. And those that are not familiar with that, it's an assessment you take, and it identifies your top 5 out of 20 or 22 strengths. They're all good, so there's no bad answers there. But you learn what your top 5 strengths are, and I really encourage people to do that, and I encourage leaders to have their teams do that, so that you can say, "Gosh, why do I have Debbie doing this when her natural strengths would be perfect for this project we've got over here?" And again, it's not always that easy to move roles and people around, but it's a great starting place. And you asked, the mistake we make in talent development, it's not taking the time to really understand what our team members' natural strengths are.
Good. And that kind of leads into my next question, which is, how can managers better identify and nurture the unique potential of their teams?
In back to the everyone deserves a great manager, the 6 critical practices for leading a team. Practice number 2 is hold regular one-on-ones. Now you're thinking, okay, where are you going with this, Todd? But one-on-ones, when done well, surface exactly what you just asked about. the mindset we ask people to think about in having one-on-ones is that, first of all, let it be more of the employees meeting than your meeting, Ms. Leader or Mr. Leader. Let it be more of the employees meeting, and then make sure you halt them. That's another key takeaway. You're going, well, what are you talking about? They tend to be, as we've done an analysis, the most frequently canceled or moved around meeting. And every time you do that, you're sending this signal to the employee that they're not as important as whatever else came up. But to your question now, in the one-on-ones should not be this status check. I mean, maybe that needs to be a part of it, but you want to get deep understanding about what is the employee passionate about? Do they understand the top goals of the company and where they might contribute, or how their role that they're in does currently contribute? So taking the time to really understand the employee and letting them surface that is the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question about how can I deeply understand just what you really want to do, but why do you think you're good at that? Are you good at that?
So one of the things that, I was recently giving a keynote, and one of the things I share in that is that we can't be complacent. We may hire the great hire. I talk about in a lot of my articles, finding the pink unicorn, right? It's hard enough to find a unicorn, but we all want to find a pink one. And once you've found whomever it is, sometimes there's a sense of saying, okay, great, I've got that person. They're on my team. I'm done. But we really need to continue to grow them. Otherwise, they're going to stagnate and they're not going to be as valuable as they could be as we go forward. So are there any processes or programs that you've seen to be transformative in developing people?
Two things that comes to mind as you ask that question. Man, you've got good questions. Okay. So again, I'm going to refer to the 6 critical practices. So practice number 4 is to create a culture of feedback. And in that practice, we dive deep into reinforcing feedback. And this is only part of my answer, but reinforcing feedback. Often we think of feedback as, well, I got to course correct this person, or I got to help this person change this bad behavior. And yeah, there's a need for that. But the reinforcing feedback are for your superstars. They're not just going to your point, you're not going to hire them and, oh, great, they don't, squeaky wheel, I don't have to do anything because they do everything so well. Trust me, they're going to want to be challenged. They're going to want to continue to grow as great as they are. And so look for opportunities to give those people feedback. Cindy, I so appreciate, gosh, in our team meetings, I just realized I have never asked you to bring the XYZ report, but you bring it every time, and you've already highlighted, you seem to have this sixth sense of knowing where we're going. I just want you to know how much I value that. Well, let me tell you something, John. Cindy, when she was a little girl and her mom or dad said, hey, Cindy, you tied your shoes for the first time, that was a huge win and an endorphin rush for her. Those endorphin rushes don't go away. I don't care. You can be 16 or 26 or 56, and we still love that. And it's a good thing to love that. So look for opportunities to give that reinforcing feedback to your superstars. But the other part of my answer.
Before you go on to the second part, I have to give you great feedback because you've had great insight, and you've actually answered my next question, which is how can performance feedback be made more constructive and empowering? So well done, Todd.
Just the second part, and you asked for a process. It's just a process I use. It's not a process I've seen, but I'm sure there are great processes out there. I say you put your teams into 3 groups, and I'm going to speak quickly here and be a little bit, it's not quite this harsh. You got your superstars, you got your wannabes, and you got your POABs, P-O-A-B. Okay? Superstars needs no definition. Your superstars on a regular basis, like at least every 6 months, you want to ask them 3 questions. What's working well for you? What's not working so well? What would you like to do next? And I have leaders say, I don't want to ask Gretchen what she wants to do next. Because what if it's not something I can get to her, or what? I don't want her to do anything next. I want her to keep doing what she's doing. Okay, well, let's just then not ask her and have the company on the street ask her, and then you lose Gretchen. So you always want to stay in touch. And superstars want to be challenged. They want to continue growing, to your earlier point. Your wannabe. Well, what do they want to be? They want to be superstars. And so the questions are a little bit different. What's working for you? What's not working for you? Here's what I'd like you to do next. So give your wannabes the opportunity to stretch them and grow them. So you still want to know and invest in them, what's working for you, what's not working for you. Here's what I'd like you next, because those wannabes, there's a lot of superstars hidden in there. And with the right curiosity, you can flesh that out. And then your POABs. Have you ever heard of the term POAB before, P-O-A-B?
I don't believe so.
That's good, because I made it up. So if you had heard of it, I'd be in trouble. But it's those who should probably be on another bus. and I use that a little tongue-in-cheek, but I'm saying clearly there are those people, still good people, wonderful people, that probably will be better making a contribution somewhere else. And so that's when you go into, performance planning and helping them see where they should
I talk about it in terms of teams, that we're not a family, we're a team. And what's the great thing about a team is, hey, we work together, all this stuff. And in teams, if you're not playing well, you can sit on the bench. And if you're not playing for a long, maybe you play better for another team.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we still care about you, but in fact, because we care about you, let's get you where you can go play.
Let's look a little bit about the future here. What workforce trends are you tracking that will shape the future of talent?
Well, again, no surprise to anyone, but just technology, just AI. In fact, my son was over here last night. He works for a large publicly traded firm, and they were talking about a role he was sharing with us, which kind of blew my mind, but a role that previously was done by human beings, which is now done by technology. And so, and again, this isn't news to anyone, but I just think, boy, do leaders need to be aware of that. Because of that, we owe it to our teams to continually be investing in them and in ourselves so that we stay relevant, so that we stay current, so that we can say, okay, what needs to be done next then? We're, kind of keeping ahead of that game. We'll always need the human factor, of course, but boy, great leaders, and that's practice number 6 in the 6 critical practices is manage your time and your energy. You've got to invest in yourself, because what the leaders value gets valued. And so you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your teams to model that investment in yourself. So I think that's a huge change. I think the war on talent has always been and will always be. In fact, here in the United States, what is it? Not to get political here, but the unemployment is an all-time low, 0.7, I think. I heard the other day, 0.7 people for every job opening. I'm not sure how you hire a 0.7, maybe it's just a really short person, but you hire a 0.7 person. So I think we will never be to a point where we don't need to continue looking for great talent.
So with the changing needs in the happening in the workplace, how must leadership and or talent development evolve to meet those needs?
I think you almost just said it. I mean, we've got to realize that it is changing, because I've worked with leaders who are stagnant and the world is moving on without them. And so I think we first of all got to realize that change is the one constant, and we've got to evaluate and reevaluate on a much more frequent basis than we used to. What's needed now on the team? What has changed? What has shifted? We just did a minor restructure at Franklin Covey because some of the needs and areas that we need to invest, we needed to shuffle the money, the cash, so that we could invest in those areas. So I think it's a more frequent, and this is just off my top of my head, but more frequent evaluation than it ever has been before, like on a regular basis.
I think that's a great point. I mean, things are changing so rapidly. And it's not necessarily just within your company. Maybe your company is still trying to do the same business, but the external influences, so much of that is changing so quickly that you need to be assessing constantly and seeing what shifts you need to be making. It doesn't necessarily have to be throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, but maybe we need to change the temperature of the bathwater, or at least change the soap.
Well, that's a good analogy. And let's not wait. The biggest change, at least in recent history, was the pandemic. It was forced upon everyone, regardless of where you were in the world, had to come up with or close down, come up with a different way to work, a different way to work. And while that was unforeseeable, or most argue it was unforeseeable, let that be a good lesson to us to try and anticipate changes and be adaptable and be flexible and think about the possibilities of how we can, again, in our same industry, but provide those same services or that same value in different ways.
Let me give you 2 questions here as we close up. What advice, for the first one, what advice would you give or have for companies truly wanting to put their people first?
Know your people. Take the necessary time to know your people. I in an organization recently, I saw a situation that, without going into too much detail, that did not end well. And it was just fundamentally the leaders making the decision did not know their people, did not know how they would react. Were a little bit, not intentionally, these are good leaders, but were out of touch with their people. And so I just think whatever time it takes, and with everything else you're juggling, people at the foundation of that. So know your people.
Very good. All right, final question. Instead of talking about the companies, how can each of us unlock our own potential to have maximum positive impact?
I love that question too. I think be more self-aware. I teach a course on increasing the social emotional intelligence of your workforce and how we do that, how one can do that. And it really boils down to judgment. You think of your top performers, Sean. You think of the most talented people you've known in your career, worked with in your career. And while they have many skills, in my experience, it's kind of based in their judgment. They have extraordinary judgment about people, it's very closely tied to this emotional intelligence, just what to say, what not to say. And so how people can really bring out their very best is be very transparent with yourself, be very self-aware. Metaphorically speaking, look in the mirror every day and say, where do I need to get better? What can I do differently? Where can I improve? So I think doing everything you can to be self-aware about what your strengths are, what your areas that you're not so good at are, where you want to be, and so what do you need to invest in to become even better? That self-awareness is key.
That's great. And, for some of us, that may be difficult. And so fostering good friendships and relationships where you can get that little, not necessarily a little voice that will sit there and say, actually, you really want to know my opinion? I think this is not really working for you, or you're not really good at this sort of thing. Maybe you ought to give that to somebody else or work on that skill, as you try to move forward.
That's so true. Practice number 13 in the Get Better book, 15 Proven Practices to Build Effective Relationships. Practice number 13 is make it safe to tell the truth. And you just hit it on the head. Do you make it safe for others to tell you the truth? If I call you right after we're finished talking here and say, hey, John, what do you think? How did I do? Most people, what are they going to say? They're going to tell you what you want to hear.
Oh, it's great. Thanks, blah, 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 blah,
Thank you. So glad you said that. But if I had said yesterday, hey, John, after we're done, would you mind taking some time when you have time? Share with me things that you think I could do better. That's how we make it safe for others to tell us the truth. Let them know you're really interested in getting better and you want their honest opinion, and don't put them on the spot. It's how you ask them. Don't put them on the spot. Give them some time to think about it.
Yeah, I was in that same book. I was had just read. This is the curse of having just read a book here recently. It says the ideas are floating in your brain, but in the Pixar Disney animation culture, one of the ways they tried to foster that was they said so that they would be listening to and expecting people to share negative feedback, because sometimes the people were just too nice was the concern. He said, I would like to hear 3 to 5 things that you liked about this, and I want 3 to 5 things that we could improve on this. So it was, it's expected that I'm going to share this, areas of improvement. Yeah, exactly. So it was great. Todd, it's been great talking with you. I look forward to hopefully continuing our discussion in other forums. So thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I've learned a lot.
And that will do it for this week's episode of Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe so you can get notified of new episodes. Also, if you could just spare a minute, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave a review to help others like yourself discover the show. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.
This has been Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you want to empower your organization to reach new heights, go to johnwmitchell.com to find the techniques and tools you need to attract and retain the best team and boldly reimagine your workplace. Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell is a production of Forbes Books.